I felt wealthy as a teenager. I felt wealthy that I was able to buy Christmas presents for my family with my own money that I'd earned. If you drop me into another company right now and said, hey, it's BAU, I think there's probably a million people who are better at that than I, because I've got that drive or that impatience to never waste time.
I'm very conscious about removing the wombats. And I was like, what's a wombat? And he said, activities which are a waste of money, brains and time. I audit my diary to make sure there's no wombats there. But
you get to Saturday and you're very tired. You're all out of energy, enthusiasm. And you say, I've been really busy this week. And then you look at it and you sort of say, what have you achieved?
In this episode of Stratospheric Leaders, I am delighted to be joined by David Mercer, CEO of LMAX Group. And David is one of the most influential figures at the intersection of institutional finance and crypto. LMAX Group is a global financial technology powerhouse and the leading independent operator of institutional execution venues for FX and crypto trading, ranked as one of the fastest growing companies in the UK. Now, David, I am very excited about our conversation today, and I'd love to dive straight in. As I shared there, you are the CEO of LMAX Group, also a former city banker, a currency specialist, over 30 years in capital markets. But I want to rewind to way back when. What was your first ever paid job?
So what you said is I'm just old. That's really what mattered. But actually, I think probably I'm a little bit non-standard in that I entered the workforce aged 18. So look, I can't remember ever not working. So put simply, I had 3 jobs every morning before I went to school from the age of 14. So, I brought the papers in, I marked up the paper rounds, and I did 1 or 2 paper rounds, and then I went to school. So I did that from the age of 14. I had a little bit of break for my A-levels, and then post A-levels, and in the summer, I worked in building warehouses, builders' yards, and clothing warehouses. And I went straight from a clothing warehouse in the summer to Ernst & Young as a trainee accountant when I was aged 18. So there you go.
And the builder's yard, the paper rounds, what do you think that taught you early on?
Actually, I just liked the independence that brought. If you like, maybe the independence of capital, the independence of finance. I mean, I felt wealthy as a teenager. I felt wealthy that I was able to buy Christmas presents for my family with my own money that I'd earned. I was there first thing in the morning, and it meant that other people didn't show up. I did their job, and I earned an extra few quid for doing that paper run. So I think I enjoyed that independence, and probably that was the thing that made me not go on to further education. My view is that I'd learned how to learn, and I liked the independence that sort of having my own capital meant. And I just felt that I'd be better in the workforce than just, if you like, marking time in academia. So I think overall it was paddling my own canoe and being independent.
Yeah, and what you said there, I learned how to learn. I mean, what a great skill. Many of the entrepreneurs I work with, they talk about being a voracious learner. Every day's a school day, and, be a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all. So learning how to learn is such a critical skill.
Yeah. I mean, that's when I tell the youngsters now who enter the workforce. I mean, the last time I saw you, we were just meeting our new graduates. And that's what I tell them. I say, look, you've learned how to learn. You've proven that. That's why you're here. Now you have to learn how to apply yourself. So the guys that are going to make it will have those 2 attributes. They know how to learn, and they know how to apply themselves, and that's it. And then someone actually said to me, "Well, how do you learn?" I said, "Well, that's just individual.
Yeah,
right? All of you are going to have to work out what's best for you. Right? What's your best method?" And I think nowadays there's so many more ways to learn. And it's not one size fits all. Probably when you and I were studying, there was more 1 or 2 different ways of doing it. Now I think there's many. So, but it's key that we keep learning through our lives, and that we learn that ability very early on.
Yeah. My son, he's doing his GCSEs at the moment. He's like, I just don't know how to revise. And I'm like, you do know how to revise. Like, you've got to your point, find your own
Yeah,
technique. My
that's
way of
it.
doing things might be very different.
100%. 100%. I agree. And that's, if you like, why I sort of maybe jumped out of academia, because for me, I didn't appreciate the way we were taught. I mean, language is a classic example. I don't know about you, but we used to go into language labs, never actually speak the language, go into language labs and more or less mess about. So I was like, that's not the way that you learn languages. And I think now the way people, certainly in STEM, there's much better ways of learning now than we were taught. So I think you're right. Everyone can jump in, and some people, I think, modern society, they learn to dart around a lot more. Their minds are maybe less stable. So they're gonna have to learn in bite-sized chunks. And I think, and we put labels on people, whether it be ADHD or whatever. And I think I was a little bit like that. Perhaps the guy that was always sitting by the window, looking out the window, daydreaming potentially. And maybe that method of learning where, sit there and do double maths or double history probably isn't for me, probably wasn't for me. So I think everyone's got to find their method. And look, the young folks of today, they have many more distractions than us.
Yeah.
I think in many ways it's more difficult for them, but they can find a way. And the good leaders or teachers can adapt their methodologies for society today.
And I think there's so much available on the internet in terms of how to learn. Just put it into ChatGPT. That'll offer you some frameworks. Try them all, and then see which one works best. And look, when you think about your early ambition and starting at Ernst & Young, like, who were the people around you who believed in you? Because I think again, were there people around you, or did it all come from within?
I think a lot of it was inner drive, but I'd also say, was it ambition or a fear of failure? When I made quite an aggressive decision, given my schooling, to go and enter the workforce. If you like, for me to do what I felt was a mini degree, like trainee accountant, rather than go to university, but also earn money. So that was quite a distinct decision. So of course you look at your family and they back you, but they did look a little bit askance at me because it was non-standard, and all of my friends were going off to university. So I think they support you in the only way they can. And look, I think then throughout that journey from, as I entered the workforce early, aged 18, and sort of quite a grown-up workforce, I wasn't playing at it. I joined it was the big six then, it's probably the big four now. I was joining the big six. And then shortly after that, a few years after that, I'm entering a large investment bank. So I wasn't just dipping my feet in employment waters. I was fully committing. So then I think in terms of people around you who back you would actually be those who took a chance on you, right? So it would be the employers. And there hasn't actually been that many in my life in terms of the people that employed you, the people that offered you jobs, but there's 5 or 6 people that did. And, thank you to them, and, hats off to them that took that chance, took that risk, and perhaps, backed the square peg in the round hole.
And when you think back, because I think it's so interesting when, individuals believe in us, they see that potential. Who's somebody you would credit for seeing, what your pathway could be?
I'll spare their blushes a little bit, but look, I think I started off in banking in the middle office, and I made it to the front office relatively early, a non-standard route again. Imagine a school leaver goes into accounting, joins an investment bank in the middle office, and it was, AAA rated new entity called Credit Suisse Financial Products, CSFP, for those of you who are around in those days. I was in the middle office. Look, maybe that wasn't the right place for this character. So there was 2 individuals, one in the middle office, who was the boss, and one who was in the front office. They happened to know each other. And I think literally they had that conversation, Georgie, where they said, hey, look, we've got a live one up here. He might be better suited down there. Don't get me wrong. I'd done my apprenticeship, so to speak, 2 years in the middle office. They had that conversation. And, ultimately, initially in the front office, I went to work for the COO of fixed income. So kind of like a middle office role in the front office, but that got me that exposure. And that's, back to an earlier question, probably my ambition grew from there because I saw it was possible. Yeah. And maybe for the first time, I understood what capital markets was all about. I mean, maybe I'm a slow learner, but it took me that 4 years of auditing, accounting, middle office to get to the front office and go, okay, that's what it's all about. So I think those people that made those changes, obviously I wanted to do it. Obviously I wanted to get there, but those two gentlemen made that decision. And we're talking, unfortunately, one of them's passed now, but they made that decision over 30 years ago to push me in that direction. And thank goodness they did.
Yeah, and it's interesting there because that pushing, as you said, you've done your apprenticeship. Yes, you made LiveWire, but they could see what you would bring to the role. And several things that really stood out for me there is, this non-standard career that you've had, but you said, it's distinct decisions. There's been a real consciousness of decision making. It's not, I'm just going to follow the flow. I'm going to do what everyone else does. It's like, what's the right decision for me? It goes back to your learning. What's the right way for people to learn? What's right for you? And you said something that really, really, I think is such an important lesson for life today. You said, when you were choosing between, whether to go to university, I didn't want to just go and mark time. And time is such a finite resource. And how many people are consciously living? So many people are just marking time. And I just felt that as I listened to you, I thought, right, we all need to take a daily dose of that.
100%. I mean, it's the most precious commodity we have. So I think guard it. I think you guard it as your most precious commodity. And when you're analyzing your career, I think again back to young people today, they're going to have longer careers than us, right? They're going to live longer. So maybe they can spend more time trying other things. But I've certainly felt I didn't have time to waste. I came from that environment that's, you're going to work until your 50s. Now I think people think they're going to work to their 60s, and probably the next generation, they're going to think they're going to work to their 70s. I felt like I didn't have time to waste. I still feel like I don't have time to waste. And I think when you analyze that, I try not to waste time. And I certainly try not to waste time at work. We're always striving to be better. We're always striving to achieve, because 1 year of marking time for me, I feel like I'm falling behind. I've always felt that. Maybe that's, the driver, the fear of failure. I think that's probably the biggest driver for me, and maybe for everyone in capital markets. But just marking time, just business as usual doesn't suit me. And I'd probably say if you drop me into another company right now and said, hey, it's BAU, let's just say it's a listed vehicle or a dividend stock, right? And it's just BAU, cranking out more and more widgets and appeasing shells. I think there's probably 1 million people who are better at that than I, because I've got that, that drive or that impatience to never waste time.
And it's Aristotle, isn't it, who said, like, knowing thyself is the beginning of all wisdom. And some people love BAU, and we need people who love the BAU. Yep. So it's knowing what brings you alive, what activates you. You said about guarding your time, and I was going to ask you in a second how to do that, because I think as leaders, there are many things competing for our time, our attention, focus. But one leader shared with me a while ago, he said, I'm very conscious about removing the wombats. And I was like, what's a wombat? And he said, activities which are a waste of money, brains, and time. Like, I audit my diary to make sure there's no wombats there. But how do you guard your time where there are many, there are many demands of it?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I've never found it that difficult. I'm quite harsh with it. I mean, I've been well known to walk out of meetings that are pointless from day one at LMAX. And I used to be probably the naughty kid at class, but in business at the start, I remember, you probably remember as well, when we switched from the ECU to the Euro, and then we had Y2K. I used to basically fall asleep at these donkey meetings where, everyone's just nodding their head. We didn't achieve anything. So whenever I became able to be a boss of some description, I just got rid of these donkey meetings, right? So I do not have a Monday morning meeting. Biggest waste of time ever. I have very few periodic updates with my team. I trust my team. So if you look at my diary, I think you'd be quite surprised at how blank it is. Certainly when I first got an EA, I think we were very surprised at how little was in my diary, because I walk around and I grab people, and I could have an impromptu meeting that might take an hour and a half. But I can have an impromptu meeting that takes 5 minutes. But what you won't see is a lot of periodic catch-ups and get-togethers. So a good day for me, I come to work every single day, Georgie, if I'm in London. And I love it if I come to work and there's nothing in my diary, right? So again, back to protecting time, preserving it, and giving myself time to think. Nothing fills me with dread more than a day which has got 8 meetings in it back to back. Typically, that only really happens when I travel. That happens in London. I know it's going to be a very average day for me. And what happens, I think, with human beings and in business is Monday to Friday happens like that. And you've had, I don't know, let's just imagine you've had 25, 30 meetings that week. You get to Saturday and you're very tired. You're all out of energy, enthusiasm. And you say, I've been really busy this week. And then you look at it and you sort of say, what have you achieved? There's a very famous video online with Buffett and Gates, and it says busy is the new stupid. So I try to avoid that. I try to avoid busy calendars. In my view, I know this is a long answer, but in my view, I allow myself a lot of time to think, and I guard time preciously.
Yeah, and it's that busy is the new stupid. I love, and it's interesting because a lot of leaders I work with, that time to think, that those exact words that you said, I'm struggling with time to think, and it's not just individually. It's sometimes as a leadership team, we are lacking time to think. And to your point, then actively create space. I mean, I think that's a gift that's available to most people, but we somehow, to your point, get involved in these recurring meetings. Like, how often are we doing meeting inventories? How often do we walk out if that's not the highest and best use of our time?
100%. And I mean, I tell all everyone who works with me, get it off your desk. Just get it off your desk. I see this as one of my biggest jobs. Get it off my desk, because the last thing I want to be is the bottleneck, the thing that prevents us moving ahead. And sometimes you see a lot of people guarding their position, or if you like, guarding their position and wanting to feel all important. I'm kind of the opposite. I just want all BAU stuff off my desk to other people who are empowered, and then I can be doing fun stuff, because sometimes I have to be doing the fun stuff, which could be the next big thing for us. Or I need to be looking at 10 things and we're going to delete 9 and only do 1. But if I'm dealing with a lot of BAU, if you have the old proverbial in tray and it's all sitting at David's desk, we're going to be sluggish. And someone else, one of my competitors isn't making that compromise, and I'm falling behind. So I think that's certainly the way I work, and I'm trying to encourage my team to work the same way. It's somewhat unnatural, I think, certainly in the United Kingdom, maybe a little bit in the United States, and that the way you progress up the hierarchy, you're given more and more responsibility, you make more and more decisions, and then you don't give them away. What you have to do is get the ability to make more decisions and then empower people to take them, right? I spend a lot of my time doing that. I really, really, really don't want to be making many BAU decisions.
Yeah.
And I don't think any CEO should be. I mean, I need to be making decisions 12 months, 18 months hence.
Yeah, there's I think it was Einstein that talked about decision-making fatigue. Like, you've got to really give thought to which of the decisions, that you're uniquely positioned to make. And what I wrote down there, listening to you, is, don't be the bottleneck, hire the right team, empower them to make the decisions, and then get out of the way.
That's it. I mean, you probably said it better than me. And actually, that fatigue bit, I mean, I'd probably say I'm very average at making decisions in my personal life. because I don't want to make any. I genuinely don't want to make any, right? Of an evening or at the weekend. I sort of think, okay, I've used it up. I've used up all my decision-making ability, Monday to Friday or in the office. And now, I'm not going to say I'm easygoing because everyone would dispute that. But literally, I don't want to make any monumental decisions. And that's maybe a bad sign that the work life has flowed over into personal life, because I'd say I'm not good at it in my personal life, and I'd say I'm pretty good at it, or better than average in my professional life.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I hear you. It's what we have energy for. And ultimately, I suppose in our personal life, what do we care about? Like it's not giving too much energy to the things that simply don't matter. But I met Toto Wolff recently, the team principal of Mercedes-Benz, and he was talking about decision-making fatigue. So he wears, when he's not on the grid or in the paddock, the same, for any, I suppose, speaking occasion, like navy suit, white shirt, like same outfit. The same with like Steve Jobs had, the same, his own work attire. He's like, I don't want to be choosing, should I wear the pink shirt, the blue shirt, or the what? I just need to know, like, that's just one decision. And he has the same food, I think, most days, because again, I don't want to have to make a decision. Like that stuff just doesn't. I want to reserve my energy, every unit of energy, for the big things.
Fair play to him. I mean, I think we all try and do that. But I mean, that's a big job, I think, for anybody running a business, running a department, is to try and minimize the decisions. Sort of a good way of looking at it, perhaps, is that you maximize the decisions that the group and the company can make. And you do that by minimizing the ones you have to make.
I'd love to explore a little bit around your decision to join LMAX, because you joined in 2011. And I'd love to know, like, what inspired you to join the company?
Do you know, again, the non-standard David Mercer story. The best job I've ever had was interim CEO for LMAX. And that's how it started. So inspiration, try before you buy. And literally that happened to me, right? 6 months, interim CEO, the problems weren't mine. And it was like, what is there to rescue? So I think the inspiration is then beyond that initial 6 months. The first 6 months, beautiful, right? A lovely existence, if you like. And knowing almost no responsibility apart from to the shareholders, to the stakeholders who parachuted me in to have a look at this.
Yeah.
The inspiration came during that 6 months. I was a little bit blown away, if I'm honest, by the technology. Simple as that. I mean, they got almost everything wrong in terms of day one when I walked in, but the technology was phenomenal. So all I had to do was direct it towards a market which they hadn't thought about, right? My market I chose was institutional foreign exchange. They had decided to go more retail and more equity. So I sort of absolutely turned the boat around. But then I thought, the inspiration, if you like, to me was, wow, this is everything I've ever wanted. I was 2 years of age. I spent 2 decades learning my trade. A decade learning capital markets, another decade learning how to be an entrepreneur, how to be a business, and now able to put that all together in almost something that was greenfield, but post-startup. Who knows if I was the guy for the first 3 years during that startup. I might have been too impulsive. I might have been too impatient. Who knows? But all of a sudden, all we had to do was, I say this perhaps a little bit blithely, but all I had to do was finish the product and direct it at a slightly different market, get the right people in the right boxes, which meant changing some of those people, and ultimately focusing on sales and distribution, which is manna from heaven for me at that stage. I didn't have the 3 years of hard yakka getting to a point where I can enter the field of sales. So I think the inspiration came during that first 6 months. And once I saw what we had under the hood, right? Once I saw this Ferrari that had been dressed as a Skoda, I was like, okay, now I am the person for this job. This job is made for me. This is the greatest fortune I've had in my working life. This is hand in glove. This is everything I should be doing, having served a 20-odd year apprenticeship. Let's go, God, let's go get it. So there's the long answer, and the short answer would be the technology which already existed at LMAX.
Yeah, I feel like your DNA, all the components of your DNA were just this perfect fit. And I imagine coming in as the interim CEO, you're coming with openness, and there's an objectivity, and clearly you could see things that they couldn't yet see. And your experience knew, like, look, this is a Ferrari dressed as a Skoda, but I can see how we can make this, an extraordinary success.
Yeah, I think, I've got a very, very smart CTO here, and he refers to it as first principles basis. I think I was able to do that in those first 6 months, and I was able to do it with him. And, I ask, there's 4 questions. They call them the Mercer questions. Look, they're not necessarily the Mercer questions. They came from various business books and startup books over the years. But, what is it? What problem does it solve? Why is it different? And what's in it for me? And all I really did in this first principles basis in the first 6 months was go, why are we doing that? Why is that different? How are you going to, one of the things, there's a massive project about equities right now. To this day, we don't do equities. 15 years on, we don't do equities. We do indices, but we don't do equities. The massive project about equities. Like, guys, what value are you adding? What problem are you solving in the equity market? And they sort of looked at me blankly. And I go, why is it different? And, there's a lot of big names out there in terms of equity brokers. I said, listen, this is back 15 years ago. Guys, I can buy you any stock in the world right now for $5. What are you adding? And they sort of looked at me. And right now, by the way, imagine having that conversation today, because guess what? They now pay you to buy stocks. Right? Basically, you can trade for free. So there and then, I said, okay, let's stop that. Let's not do that anymore. And then obviously, I sort of looked. Then I was able to say, okay, who knows foreign exchange? Not many people did. And I said, okay, well, this is the problem in this market. This is why we can be different. And this is what's in it for you. This is what's in it for your clients. This is what's in it for our shareholders and our stakeholders. So yeah, again, back to where we started with that, Georgie, try before you buy, really good opportunity. And I'd almost recommend it to anyone to come in and have like 6 months to look around, and also maybe to have that honesty. Because I had to report back to shareholders, and it was more or less, is there anything to save? And I sort of said, well, yes, but no. Like most startups, not what you initially intended. But let's pivot. Let's use those, trendy phrases. Let's pivot. I don't think I used that phrase at the time, right? Let's change. Let's finish the product in this way, and let's go after this market, and let's change these people. So, really, really good opportunity. I think maybe more people should do it that way. I do think also, it was like a chip on my shoulder, maybe initially. People talk about founders. By the way, there's people like Elon Musk aren't really founders. They go and buy other companies. And I looked at LMAX, and I'm very grateful for everyone that was here before me and what they'd built from a tech perspective. And if you like, I sort of refounded it. And as I go back to, am I the guy to create that startup? Would I have had the vision without the core around it, the core tech? So, and perhaps when I look at my career and how I progressed, even from the early days in banking, it was maybe not designing the code, but understanding the power of that technology. And especially as we embrace all new technologies, and we have done over the last 20, 30 years, and it's understanding the power that the new technologies have and the change they're going to make in your given market, in capital markets, and in society as a whole. So, I'll probably come down to always and say a little bit of luck, fortunate in timing, but I really enjoyed that first 6 months. And I think from then on, I was fully committed. The first 6 months was a dip around, have a look, do a job for a set of shareholders. Since then, I haven't worked a day in my life, if I'm honest with you. I've been fully committed and enthusiastic in every single second.
Oh God, there's so much there that but the passion and enthusiasm is clear. And I think, when you're giving, when investing so much of your time and energy, like, you have to love what you do. There has to on balance be this passion and enthusiasm. And the questions you asked about, what is it? What problem does it solve? How's it different? I think when we actually, take time to pause to ask ourselves, those questions, there could be other first principle questions, it really can change the trajectory. And that's not time out, that's time invested, creating that space to make sure you're on the right pathway.
Yeah. I mean, everyone walks around now asking the same thing, from small decisions, small projects to big projects. It's like, have to be able to answer. They're so basic. I think it covers everything in business, if I'm honest with you. And sometimes a lot of people, we try and avoid it. There's a lot of Me Too products in the market. Somebody said to me, actually, a customer of mine said that everything's been invented, David. Everything in capital markets has been invented. To a certain extent, that's true. But, I think with the advent of blockchain, potentially with AI, sort of more machine learning, we can evolve it in a different way. Look, the 4 questions that I apply can be applied to everything. And it's important. I think the key bit in there is the 3rd one. Why is it different? We must be different, right? The solution must be different. There's a lot of Me Too products out there. And if all you ever do is build Me Too, you're going to fail, right? You're going to lose because, you're not the first mover for a start. And then if you're the second mover, that can be okay. But what problem are you solving with the first mover? Yeah. Is it different? Is it better? And if it's just cheaper, that's not going to be good enough. And I see that a lot. And it's a real challenge, right? Because you think, to a certain extent, everything in capital markets has been invented, right? Customer of mine said that to me. It's been invented. What can be different now? I think with modern technology, there's so much tweaking. There's so much differentiation. Go back to a previous story we talked about there. I mean, people trading equities for free. When I first traded equities, it cost me, 20 basis points, 30 basis points. Now it's free. Yeah. So we are tweaking around the edges, but I think you've got to go back and ask those 4 questions. What is it? Should be easy. What problem does it solve? Why is it different? And what's in it for me, you, whoever that stakeholder is? Yeah. And I think you can apply that to every bit of business. And I do it to myself sometimes because we get very excited. AI is classic for that, Georgie. We get very excited by AI and machine learning. Oh, look at this. Look how good this is. Look what ChatGPT. And I was like, okay, that's wonderful. How's that helped me, us, my customers? I look a lot at AI right now, and don't get me wrong, I think it's great for the world, but has it made us more efficient, us at LMAX more efficient? Not necessarily just yet. Has it made us more productive? Hard to judge. Has it made us more money? No. Okay. Now, it's going to help us with the underlying pillars. Perhaps 80% of code, or the first 80% of code, can now be created. The building blocks can be created by it. But I'm still going to need the smarts for the last 20%. And it's forcing us every single time to ask the questions, why are we doing it? And back to something we talked about earlier, the prioritization of time. Right? Why a lot of companies fail, and probably why we've failed at times, is we try and do too much, try and do too many things. Or it hasn't been clear from day one that we've answered the question, that we've solved the problem, right? That we've created a differentiator. So now it's one of the things I'm constantly working on, to make sure that we understand that before we take the first step into a new market or a new product.
And when you answer those questions honestly, there's and hold, each of yourself to, a standard, like, right, we need to really, make sure we get clarity around this. To your point, it really then informs, where do you spend the time and effort and the resources? And yeah, I just think I think not people are often so busy in the doing and the go, go, go that there can be an absence of like, let's just take a pause, let's strategize, let's really give thought to how does this serve our stakeholders? How does this serve us? So I think I feel we need to memorialize those Mercer questions. They're good ones. And you said there about, why do you think some companies fail, or why do some teams fail? Like, what do you see? Where do people trip themselves up?
It's a very wide question, Georgie, but I think, look, you've got to have the discipline, understanding where you fit in. I think probably they try and do too much, or they haven't got that clarity at the outset. Now, two bits to that, actually. Clarity at the outset, and then the ability to transition. I mean, I've done it a lot. By the way, people always ask me when I have town halls here, how did you foresee this? And have you got things wrong? Gee, I've got a bunch of things wrong here. An old-fashioned trader once said to me, I make 10 trades, I get 3 bang wrong, but I cut them early. I get 3 to 4 fair to middling, right, whatever, and then I've got to try and maximize the 3 that I get right. It's a bit like that in business. I think sometimes people get almost too emotionally attached to the idea they had at the outset. Before you go into it, let's have clarity. What are we doing? Okay, fully commit to it. And then don't be afraid to close it, end it, or change it.
Yeah.
And another thing I've said here, and again, this isn't the Mercerism, but it's like, look, we're all trying to succeed quickly. All right? That's our goal. I don't think I've ever succeeded quickly, by the way. LMAX Digital, maybe the quickest we ever did, so we broke even within 6 months. That's probably the quickest. Every other exchange has taken years to build this. So let's try and succeed quickly. Succeeding slowly is okay. It can be tiresome, bothersome, and you might run out of oxygen, right? Cash on the way. But succeeding slowly is okay. Failing quickly is also okay, right? Failing slowly, unforgivable.
Yeah.
Cannot happen. So it's that. So why do people fail? It's probably, I think a lot of it is they fail too slowly. Get it wrong, move on. Right? Don't keep, it's a bit like back to the trading analogy, is don't just hang on to something because you thought it was right 6 months ago. The market's changed, the world's changed, right? Your view on gold, I promise you, your view on gold a year ago is different to your view on gold today. Don't hang on to it. So I think I'm good at that. I think we're getting better at it. But still, if I look around the business, there's a few things I could have cut earlier, a few pivots we could have done earlier. And again, that would be my advice to younger people or younger startups is, yes, have the clarity. Yes, have the commitment, but make sure you're seeing the signs of life. Make sure you're seeing those green shoots. Make sure you're asking yourself the DMQs, if you like, every single day. And if it's not what you thought, don't be afraid to change it. Right? As I say, just look at LMAX. I mean, you can write the book on it and say what it set out to be is absolutely not what it is today. And did I know when we bought the company in 2013, did I know then that I was going to be launching LMAX Digital in 2018? Of course not. But, and by the way, did blockchains exist? Of course they did. Yeah. Did Bitcoin exist? Of course it did.
Yeah.
Right? So hold on, David, you weren't that prescient? Absolutely not. But by 2017, 4 years later, I was like, hey, this could be a big part of our future. Right? Likewise, all the acquisitions we've made recently, I'm constantly transforming, pivoting, making decisions, answering my 4 questions. And by the way, my answer to the 4 questions would be different today than they were in 2013 and 18 and 21. Right? Absolutely. So that is, evolve or die effectively. And that's why you've got to keep testing yourself and testing your team with those key areas of focus.
Oh God, there's so many gems that are coming out of this. One of the things you shared about, where people can fail trying to do too much. And my own coach said to me recently, overwhelm comes from lack of pruning and prioritization. And I was like, it's so, it's so true. It's like, what do you need to let go? But equally, where do you make, where do you need to prioritize? Failing slowly is unforgivable. Failing fast is okay because you're pivoting, you're adapting. And you said, close, end, or change. Like, you get to choose, but like, make a decision and make the right decision and keep testing yourself. And this certainly comes up with a lot of the entrepreneurs I work with that they are rigorous at testing themselves. And that's probably one of the reasons that you and them have been so incredibly successful, because it's such a discipline and it's so deliberate to make sure you're focusing on the right things and you're thinking ahead, like, where will the markets be 2, 5, 10 years from now? Like, what do I need to be thinking about?
Yep. I mean, that's key. I mean, I think that's what drives us all. It's why I love working. I told you, I haven't worked a day in my life. Certainly since I came here, right? I love it. But what I love is that challenge, right? Mm-hmm. What's next? And it's that evolution. If it was easy, if it was just BAU, probably, as I said to you previously, there's better people for that BAU job than me. But the beauty and the reason I think I found my niche in capital markets, and I was fortunate to find my niche, is that, my goodness, it's constantly evolving. The technology, the practitioners, the market itself, the economy behind it. I mean, just look at what we've all endured in the last sort of 5 years even, right? From COVID, from people not being able to move oil and gold and all of those effects. People paying you to buy oil. I mean, that really happened. I mean, think about that. Scratch your head. Oh, my God. How many exchanges in the world could deal with a negative price? Well, why the hell would you code anything for a negative price? And we sort of solved that around the table. I would just add 100 to the price, for example. But it's like, wow, having to come up with solutions all the time. And what was right in 2021 almost certainly won't be right in 2025.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's what keeps us interested and keeps us asking those questions. And particularly the third question, trying to find solutions that are different.
Yeah. And to your point, I think, and I really hear you about that love of challenge, that love of evolution, that kind of iteration. We talked about companies that fail, when we can make mistakes. And Rich Hand, the CEO of Jefferies, I recently read a blog where he'd written, the 100 lessons no one told him when he became a CEO. And I'm curious, you were very experienced when you stepped into that, had a couple of decades but under your belt before you became interim CEO. What are 3 things you wish you'd known before taking on that role?
I sat down with Rich quite recently, actually. Inspiring guy. So I must read his 100 lessons.
I will send it to you. He's got several. He's got ones that he'd wish to his children when they graduated, one post-college. Insightful. I'll send you all.
Yeah, I think so my 3 would be Adamski, loneliness is the killer, right? It's a lonely job. So what did I expect? Not quite sure, actually. But you're on your own. Ultimately, you're on your own. And yes, you're going to have some friends, you're going to have some colleagues, but around the place that are helpful. And I'm very fortunate I do. But there are some decisions you must make on your own, and there's some decisions that affect them. And there's nowhere really else to go. You asked a question earlier. Probably 2 gentlemen on my board have been there since the outset. So they're probably the only guys that would ease that loneliness. I don't get me wrong, it's not a cry for help at all, because you wanted to be a CEO, you wanted to run the show. Perhaps I should have expected it or been more aware of it. The second one would be, it is constant. Don't think for 1 minute that you get a day off. Don't think for 1 minute that you get to have a holiday. But I think back, I don't know when we started work, Georgie, but we couldn't work. You left work on Friday at 6 p.m. You couldn't work anymore.
Yeah, no Blackberries. This is pre-internet.
How did you work? You couldn't work Saturday.
You took time off.
Work Saturday, you had to go in.
Yeah, which I sometimes did. I was one of the only people in the office.
Yeah, and me too sometimes, because when I was doing risk reports and working in the middle office, that was the only way to work, was to get in. Sometimes you pine for those days again. The other beauty of capital markets foreign exchange was that at 10 p.m. on a Friday night, in the UK that is, markets were shut. You had 48 hours off. I used to, look at lawyers and accountants and feel some sympathy for them because I had 48 hours when nothing could happen. Guess what? We then got involved in digital and crypto markets 2018, which are never off. So I think it's constant. So you have to love it. You really have to love it because you can't decide when to turn it on, when to turn it off. You can't decide when you're going to have the best idea, right? Or the worst idea, some people might say, but it's like something might just come to you and it might be, 3 p.m. on a Sunday. Also, because of the advent of, as you say, smartphones, laptops, always on markets, I remember one of the first holidays, a member of staff I didn't know particularly well wrote me this highly critical email. And, went on in old school terms, probably be about sheet and a half of A4. Very hard to shape that on a holiday. Now, in our earlier lives, Georgie, I wouldn't have seen it. I would have enjoyed my holiday. Yeah. So, look, I think it's constant. So again, back to things we've mentioned, you have to love it. You have to enjoy it because it is 24/7. Forget the hours you're in the office or when people see you. It is constant. Embrace that constant nature. Maybe I'm fortunate. Maybe you need to be a certain type of character. I love to be thinking at all hours of the day. I don't like to waste time. So if I'm sitting around at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, I'm quite happy to be thinking about work. If you don't want to be doing that, then it's not the job for you. So I guess lonely, constant. Probably the last thing is people. And perhaps don't be disappointed by people. That's a lesson in life, maybe a lesson in business. But people is a large part of what you do. You probably haven't been trained for it. Georgie, a lot of what you do will be training people for this and coaching people for this. But I mean, you're an amateur psychologist, right?
Yeah.
You're a mother, you're a father, you're a grandfather at times, right? You're a coach, you're a mentor, you're a shoulder to cry on, you're a whipping boy. That's just the way it is. And all roads lead to you. And sometimes you see this a lot in sport, but I think it's equally true in business. Sometimes you invest so much into certain people and that may not be rewarded, right? Or it may be forgotten. And you have to remember it's just people. So when I start out and I say, don't be disappointed by people, that makes it easier. Because generally they will. And generally in business, I think it's okay, right? Everyone has to look after themselves and their families. Loyalty is for your family and for your dogs. And maybe it doesn't exist in business, right? So that would be my top 3.
It was interesting when you said don't be disappointed by people. When I was listening to Toto Wolff recently, he shared, someone asked him in the talk I was at about Lewis Hamilton leaving Mercedes-Benz. And that was a complete surprise to him. And he's like, you know what? But again, don't be disappointed. Like he's made a decision. Lewis has made a decision that's the right decision for him. And actually, they're still good friends. But he could have easily been like, seen him as a traitor, and he could have had a real emotional reaction to it. But and I'm sure he did in the moment. But it's like, no, let's be rational human beings. So yeah, I love that. Loyalty is for your family and dogs.
I think it is because look, you and I probably did it back in the day in trading floors in banks, and when you're a young person on the way up, it gives so much to this company. I mean, you almost wish you'd learned the lesson. You give so much, and you think that company, that faceless company, knows you. It doesn't. You're just a number, right? And you're so far down, and ultimately, when they make changes or when they make cuts, you're just a number there. So there's no loyalty. That brand doesn't have loyalty to you, right? on the shop floor. So maybe there's a little bit of cynicism that as you progress in business, like, okay, I need to be less loyal in a way, still committed, still work hard, but understand that loyalty isn't going to happen in business or in capital markets. Maybe it can happen at the top echelons, right? Maybe it can happen, I hope I have it within the top levels of LMAX. And certainly if you look at the length of time that my executive committee have been here, you would show that loyalty works both ways. But when you start out in business, and certainly when you start out, as part of the rank and file, it's almost non-existent. And the way I get over that when I tell young people when they join us is, look, you're not all going to succeed in the same company, right? And some of our jobs is that it's two-way street. I train you, you learn, you enjoy it, you give back. At some stage, you'll be bigger and better than the job you're doing. And sometimes the next job for you is going to be outside. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Don't feel disloyal. That's okay. I've trained you, I've done my bit, and you've given me more than enough back.
Yeah.
And then you go on and you grow and you breathe. But sometimes people get a little bit attached to the position and to that company, especially when you look at, go to Canary Wharf or go to the City of London, and you imagine how many thousands of people work for some of those companies. And we're a bit unrealistic if we expect that loyalty. And certainly as a boss, I think if you start off with that premise, don't be disappointed by people, you'll be much better placed.
Yeah. I feel like what you said there's a fair trade. You train someone, they give back, and then if they move, well, again, there's an equal trade there. There's a symmetrical trade.
100%.
You talked about the loneliness piece, and that comes up with every leader I've worked with, the loneliness of the seat, because there's a difference between being alone and feeling alone. You're surrounded by an exco team, there's family, there's friends, but very few people really get it. And there's a few places where you can kind of release the pressure valve. So that loneliness, and you mentioned about the constantness, when I started in my career, there was yet no internet, whereas, I think I craved more information and more connection. And now it's the opposite. It's craving that disconnection at times because it is that constantness. And I think you made a really valuable point about leaders today. There's many things you don't have a playbook for or been trained for, to be an amateur psychologist, there are so many hats you are asked or that is, the role requires you to wear. And people are complex, let's be clear. So there are so many hats that you have to put on, and which is all additive to your to the core responsibility of being a CEO.
100%. And, I think one of the things, know thyself, you mentioned earlier, jobs like this are not for everyone. And I'm very lucky. I've got some people in this organization who don't want to be managers, who would never aspire to be CEO. And then you've got other people who aspire to be a CEO, and you go, are you sure you want to do that? Do you know what it means? Right? Because it's not for everyone. And you have to have the hide of a rhino, because if you take it too much to heart what people are saying or doing, then you mightn't be able to succeed. So I think everyone's got to know. And at times it can be a bit dull, right? Sometimes it's more fun to be out there. You haven't got many friends, back to the loneliness part. And it's more fun to be out there with the crew, right? And coming up with ideas, and maybe, who knows, maybe sniping about how tough the boss has been, or what a bad week it's been, or what a bad year and what a bad decision he or she has made. But it's not for everyone. But I'm lucky that people in these organizations, some people in these organizations say, no, I'm happy doing this. And technology is brilliant for that, actually. You have some of, and I'll go back to our former lives as well, some of the best software developers, and it's a very important part of what we do here. Technology is about a third of my company. Some of the best software developers are just the artists. They love being the artist. They love being the problem solver. They do not want to manage people. And sometimes it freaks them out. It goes the other way. It's detrimental. Well done, you've done really well, we're going to pay you more money, now you're going to manage this team of 6, and suddenly their performance declines because they're not cut out for it, they don't want to do it. And just talking about the former life, just because you were the best accountant doesn't mean you're the best partner of that accounting firm. Just because you're the best trader doesn't mean you're the best head of trader.
Yeah.
And likewise, in this position, just because you were a good employee may not mean you're the best employer. So you really have to look all around it. I would encourage people probably analyze themselves a little bit before they get into it. Probably do a bit of training and be careful what you wish for. It isn't for everyone, and I've got some really successful guys here who would never aspire to this position. I have some as well who would aspire to the position, by the way, and I encourage them. What I tell everyone, by the way, make yourself redundant. I'm more than happy, right? If someone says, I want to come up, I love it when someone says, I want your job, and I'm like, great. Now, okay, let's train you up and make sure you understand how to deal with these things.
Yeah. I remember a client saying to me that they talked about the step up into being a CEO. They said often jobs are like step changes. He's like, this was a staircase change. It was. And to your point, he said he really had to give a lot of thought before he accepted, because there is, there's public scrutiny. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with the seat. And I think you've got to go in, eyes wide open in terms of what the expectations are of you, and also enrolling people around you, knowing that it is 24/7, it is constant, it is lonely, making sure you have people around you.
100%.
I could talk to you for hours. I mean, you've got so many one-liners here. I'm so looking forward to writing this up because it's very, very powerful. Look, we talked earlier in our conversation about the pace of change in today's world, and I think we can agree it's unrelenting. And what we've seen in the last 5 years is typically what we'd see over decades. And there's a requirement not just for leaders but for people today to really adapt to that. That pace of change. When you had a conversation with your graduates, you mentioned last week. What advice would you give people around how to deal with that pace of change, so you kind of you get ahead of it rather than lagging behind?
Difficult. I mean, I think read a lot. I don't read enough, but if and when I ever take holidays, and I do, read a lot about new things. But sometimes you have to be interested in it, right? So read or take snippets. Look, if you're a TikTok generation, if you like watching videos. Okay, watch videos, try and learn from people that inspire you. And I've learned from a bunch of people that inspire me. But likewise, I can't sit down and just read an autobiography or a biography of someone that hasn't inspired me in advance. That's just it. So you've got to work out what it is for you. AI, machine learning, robotics, quantum computing. Work out what's interesting for you and then learn all about it in whichever way suits you. So then it's like, okay, David, it's all great. Just learn stuff. I'm not very good at just learning stuff, right? You can go back to my academics if you like. Just learning stuff for the sake of learning stuff. I'm like, how does that help me? What's the upside there? So what I've learned is, okay, how can I apply that at LMAX or to my life? Can it make my life better? Can it make LMAX better? So for me, I'm very practical in terms of practical learning, rather than putting together flat packs, because I'm definitely not practical like that. So practical learning for me is, let's try it. Let's do it. We just launched something a couple of weeks ago, and we started working on it 3 years ago around decentralized finance and DeFi. And I must confess, I didn't really know what DeFi was. We just launched an exchange which embraces decentralized finance now, right? We call it Omnia Exchange. 3 years we've been working on it. So I learned more and more about DeFi. I learned more and more about how you can trade from a decentralized wallet. All of my life I've been centralized. Send your money to bank A, send your money to broker B, trade the markets through market access that they provide you. Oh no, this one, start with your own wallet, MetaMask or something else. Other wallets are available. Trade into the marketplace, onto any exchange, in any product. And it's tokenized well. So I was like, wow. So I learned by doing. And I think if we had, obviously if we had longer into that, I could explain this exchange to anyone in the markets with reference to traditional finance, traditional exchanges and centralized exchanges. Or I could explain to the younger generation in a way that they understand. So it's interesting when you talk to people who talk about DeFi versus TradFi, and they look at crypto markets, and they've only learnt in crypto markets. You'll say things to them. Do you understand? They'll say no. I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, you do, because you're doing swaps on Sushi Swap, Uniswap, Aave, whatever it is. You know all this. Oh yeah, I know that. Okay. Do you understand yield? No. Well, what are you doing over here? Oh, I'm farming. Okay. So it's just jargon, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, the question was, how do you keep up with the pace of change? I probably, at some stage I won't, and I don't, and I'm lucky enough I've got younger teams here, but certainly DeFi, I think I'm hopefully ahead of the curve, or I'm certainly surfing that wave because of younger people that brought it to me. AI, personally, I'm probably behind the wave because I haven't been able to see the practical example that clearly. That doesn't suit my learning style. Thankfully, it does suit my technologists.
Yeah.
Because they use it every single day. And I'm not a frivolous type of guy in that just using ChatGPT and creating a meme of myself speaking a different language doesn't really entertain me or educate me, so I don't do it. So I think what I would encourage everyone to do is just engage in it. Also, the empowerment of me, teams around me throughout my career was harnessing modern tech. And look, that modern tech back in the 90s was spreadsheets, right? And handling big data. It's now things like Python and other ways of engineering data. So I tell the youngsters, get good at this. To be honest, I surfed my way through investment banking and went from middle office to front office on the trading desk purely because I knew how to operate a spreadsheet better than everyone else. And I knew how to handle data quicker and better than everyone else because I was at the forefront. So I encourage them to do the same because, and now, by the way, everyone out there is way better than me at spreadsheets, and actually they've moved on. That's the point. They've moved on because spreadsheets have limitations. They've moved into other ways of handling data. So it's read, learn, however you best learn, but then I'd say engage. Don't make it all theory. Make it practical, right? Why is it better for you? Why is it better for David? Why is it better for LMAX? And bingo, I think you'll very quickly find that you are in the top 1% of people who understand the power of this technology.
It's not that this is the same, but I feel there's a correlation. I remember reading a quote by Stephen Bartlett, and he said, you can read as many books as you like, but if you can't read yourself, you'll never learn a thing. And it kind of speaks to the fact we can read, we can listen, but actually it's that active engagement that's the piece that's so critical. Because theory is just theory. You mentioned there, there were a number of people who've inspired you. Who from an entrepreneur perspective or a leader in the market perspective is someone that you've not aspired to be, but it's been an inspiration.
So many, but I take little bits from all of them.
Yeah.
Look, I loved Steve Jobs, but he was a fruitcake, right? But I loved his attention to detail, right? Sometimes the madness of it. But by the way, I would be probably fully rounded human being and leader. I'd probably be more complimentary of Tim Cook. Unbelievable job that man's done, right?
Yeah.
Unbelievable positioning he's taken on himself personally, right? And still lead this company to new heights. So fully rounded human being, fully rounded leader, brave human, amazing, right? Really amazing. But the inspiration for me and what made me probably an Apple fanboy was probably Steve Jobs. And then, I read about Branson. I read a lot about him. Musk a little bit. Going back outside of sort of business. I love the Buffett approach. But I'll be honest, I've bought the Buffett and Munger books about how to invest. Doesn't really do it for me. Yeah. But I like their simplicity. Yeah. Right? I like the newsletter they write. I like the simplicity of it. So I take little bits from all of them. But I also think as much sometimes, if I'm honest with you, outside of business, read a lot about US civil rights back in the day, really enjoyed that part of sort of history and politics. So, Martin Luther King, read a lot about him, inspired by him greatly. Nelson Mandela, of course, The Long Walk to Freedom, I'd say, is one of my favorite books. Probably changed my outlook on life. The Gandhis of the world. Look, Muhammad Ali, again, more for the civil rights bit rather than his sporting prowess, which was undoubted. So I put all that together. I try and learn from all of them. I think the best business book, two great business books, if anyone's out there, apart from the ones you've written, of course, Georgie, would be best novel business book, Phil Knight, Shoe Dog.
I've got that one, the Nike, yeah. Unbelievable
book. And then From Good to Great.
Right? Yeah, I've got that one as well. There's another one. That's it. Another one I'd recommend if you like is Legacy by James Kerr, and it's about the.
Read it.
Did you? Read it. That's not in your top. Okay, is that not in your top? That's not on the
Definitely,
top.
But I think probably because I've read them all, 100% it would be. I tell you what, sometimes I stop with the sporting analogies because I love sport. I've got a third of the company technologists. Sport doesn't always rock their boat. So I could talk to you all day long and try to motivate people all day long with sporting analogies. It doesn't work for everyone. And actually, once I brought some gold medalists in here and we talked, and I just looked down the room and it just wasn't hitting.
Yeah.
So sometimes I try and move away. That book, Legacy, great for me. But I discovered I wasn't that able to use it. And there's one of my brightest minds here, again, I won't embarrass him, just said, no, I just never got sport. You look at this, lives in the United Kingdom, British bloke, and says, yeah, just never got it, never got football. And I'm like, okay. And never watched a game in my life. And you just go, okay. And I've got all these great analogies, sporting analogies, and these inspiring stories of rugby players, and it falls on deaf ears a lot. So I try and look for other inspirations. But yeah, I think throughout I'm always trying to learn more. And I love reading about people. And I love, joking aside, I'm reading all of your books. But what I never, ever, ever drink the Kool-Aid and fully buy into one human being. What I've learned, and I know this about myself, and I know about all these much greater humans that I read about, they're all flawed, right? Yeah.
Perfectly imperfect.
Correct. I love it. And I love seeing the flaws and you go, oh, thank goodness. Because initially when you start reading them, you're so inspired, you sort of think they must be perfect and they're going to show you how inadequate you are. And of course, you're inadequate. But when they recognize those inadequacies as well, and their weaknesses and their failures, it's almost heartening and drives you on to make yourself a better human.
Yeah. Do you know what's interesting with the Stratospheric CEOs, the founder CEOs I profiled there? What really struck me was the level of self-awareness and self-insight. And that comes from self-reflection. It comes from being open to people, having truth tellers in your tribe, knowing your blind spots. And what's interesting, they said, we talked about success and, the success rarely celebrated. It's the next thing, straight on to the next. Yeah. But they remember every failure like that, that's the stuff that's attached to the memory because, you want to be sure that never happens again. And I always assumed that, that success would be these big milestone moments. And I remember one said that, well, we all had a glass of champagne, when or a glass of something when they made a big acquisition. But then it's the next thing. It's like there's another summit to climb, and it's never dwelling on the success for too long. And my younger son's got a rugby podcast, and when he interviewed Martin Johnson, who was obviously captain of England, he said, "Look, I never dwell when things go really well, and equally, I never dwell too much when things I take things both sides with a pinch of salt, because I don't want to ever get too complacent, but equally you can reflect on when things don't go well, but don't get stuck in the emotion of it.
Yeah, in a way, it's a bit sad, right? But certainly they're right. And that's where I am. Perhaps you don't enjoy the highs enough.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to wait. What is the high? Like someone said to me, no, when are you done? When are you finished? I'll never finish. And in many ways, maybe I'll never succeed in my mind. Because what's succeeding? When I win, when will I win? How do I win? Right? At least you know what Martin Johnson, he won, they had one goal, they won that. But guess what? Very quickly, he'll go and lose a match or lose the next competition. So I'm trying hard to do better at enjoying the successes and getting my team to enjoy it. Yeah. Simple things, go for a beer, have a pizza day when you hit new records, right? So enjoy it, because there's enough times where we don't enjoy it when we have bad days. And likewise, again, back to that the sporting thing is, don't dwell too much on the failures, but I go back to the preparation for success and failure.
Yeah.
Prepare for both. And remember that succeed quickly, fail quickly. There's not much difference between the two. Fail quickly, you can almost celebrate, right? But making sure you make that decision so that you don't go into the unforgivable slow failure.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, it's maybe part of all of us is that constant drive to get better, to maybe chase the unachievable. I'm trying to get better for me. I'm trying to get better for my team at enjoying the high spots. But let's see, maybe we'll all go to our graves never having done that properly.
Well, you said right at the beginning of our conversation, talk about why you didn't go to university, marking time. And I suppose it's where you can mark the milestones, because it's such a great motivational opportunity. And I think there's so much noise in the world where there's something to celebrate. I think let's bask in the celebration. Well, look, we just used the word dwelling. I'm going to be dwelling on many of these insights that you shared. Thank you for being so candid and so giving of your leadership lessons. I have written pages of notes. So for me, I love learning. I love learning from inspiring people. So this has been just such a joy of a conversation. So thank you so much, David.
Great. Thank you for your time. I've enjoyed it.
If you want to see the full episode, please do look at Apple and Spotify under Stratospheric Leaders, or go to YouTube where it will be under Georgie Dickens. I hope you enjoyed the full episode. There are so many great sound bites shared.